Once you start telling American citizens to, quote, go back to your own countries, this tells you that this president's policies are not about immigration, it's about ethnicity and racism.
Good morning and welcome back to AM Joy. Well, Bronx Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez laid it all out on Saturday as new reporting from the Washington Post reveals. They reveal a firestorm in the cleanup operation that hit the White House following Donald Trump's racist tirade 1 week ago today. According to the Post, Trump's own top aides didn't think that he fully understood what he had done since last Sunday when he fired off a trio of racist tweets before a trip to his golf course. After days of damage control, aides reportedly believed that the worst was behind them until Wednesday when Trump leaned back, stuck his chin in the air, and just took it all in while his supporters erupted into racist chants of "send her back" in response to Trump's attacks on Somali-born American citizen and Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. The Post reports that Republican leaders, including Vice President Mike Pence, Republican House Leader Kevin McCarthy, and Congresswoman Liz Cheney huddled together at Pence's house the next day to, quote, figure out how to deal with the danger of the chant catching on. But with Trump doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on attacking the Congresswoman, even this morning, and with his poll numbers among Republicans going up since his racist tweets, it looked like that ship has sailed. And joining me now is Tiffany Cross of the Beat DC, Andrew Feinberg of Breakfast Media, Jason Johnson of theroot.com, Republican strategist Katon Dawson, and MSNBC Media Analyst Deggans. And Tiffany, a little bit more from that Post story. Trump defended himself when he was supposedly confronted by his aides. He had been watching Fox and Friends after waking up. He wanted to elevate the Congresswoman, as he had previously discussed with aides. The president said that he thought that he was injecting himself into Democratic Party politics in a good way. So he thought that he did a great job and wanted to keep doing it. And some of the aides that supposedly sat down with him, thinking Liz Cheney, went out and her damage control was to start yelling about Democrats being baby killers. So it's not clear that anybody knew what to do, but they didn't seem to do anything right.
Right. And this is nothing new. I mean, this is something, I think when we put all of this attention on Trump and his rhetoric, look, obviously, I think to ask the question, I still see time and again members come on television and hosts will ask, so do you think the comments, the president's comments are racist? We can stop. That question has been asked and answered. We can stop wasting everybody's time asking that. We can stop wasting time pretending this weak walk back means anything other than a failed attempt at controlling whatever damage they did with their base in the Republican Party, if any was done. But this did not begin with Trump's presidency. This is the president the Republican Party created for the past few decades. But long before Trump came in office, you had white supremacists roaming the halls of Congress. This isn't even the first time a white supremacist has occupied the White House. So we have to start identifying these things and demanding that the media call it what it is, call a thing a thing. I remember when this happened, and I didn't even flinch when it happened, but you wake up and you see the breaking news banner, Trump said something racist. Oh, it wasn't, racially charged today, or it wasn't comments that some people found to be racist. We're finally ready to call a thing. Well, let's do that. And I think if I may say, if we had newsrooms that were more representative of the country with more people of color in them, then I think we would have a lot more honest discourse about identifying these things as the racist comments and white supremacist comments they are.
And I mean, the thing about it is that, right, I think because people in the media have been so reluctant to really go straight on at things like racism, it does kind of give Republicans a cover to say, no, this is another thing, it's racially charged, it's baby bad language, because there is a cover that they're under. But it also does seem that there is a scramble, that the Republicans haven't figured out when they know, they clearly know that this was bad, right? This looks really, really bad, but they don't really know how to they don't know what to do about it. I want to show a confrontation between yourself, Andrew, and Kellyanne Conway, who at this point is sort of de facto the White House spokeswoman. She's the person going out to the press and trying to defend him, and she clearly didn't know what to do. Here was your interaction with her.
If the president was not telling these four congresswomen to return to their supposed countries of origin, to which countries was he referring?
What's your ethnicity?
Why is that relevant to this?
No, because I'm asking you a question. My ancestors are from Ireland and Italy.
My own ethnicity is not relevant to the question I'm asking.
No, it is, because you're asking about, he said originally. He said originally from.
What did you, just give us your reaction to that.
I mean, my reaction at the time, I'm used to her being inappropriate with me and responding to legitimate questions with often insulting questions. But that one, as I've said before, was a little weirder than normal. And I don't think that she really knew how to answer the question, so her response is to deflect, but this time it didn't go so well.
Yeah, clearly it didn't. Katon, my friend, let me read another little piece of this Washington Post story for you. And it says that Trump always doubles down. It says advisors wrote new talking points for Trump and handed him reams of opposition research. He doesn't read lots of stuff, but okay, they wanted to read opposition research on the 4 congresswomen. Pivot to patriotism, they said. Focus on their ideas and behavior, not identity. Some would still see a racist agenda, the argument went, but at least it would not be so explicit. So it's clear, Katon, that they understood that Donald Trump had been blatantly racist toward these women, and they wanted him to sort of backpedal into attacking their policies. But isn't the fact that since he wrote it down, it's on his Twitter feed, he said the countries you came from. He didn't say anything about the Green New Deal or Medicare for All. Backpedaling into those things, it was too late, right?
Well, it's sort of like what's in the first chapter of your book, Joy. I read it and enjoyed it and finished it this weekend. Was no matter what you hand Donald Trump as an operative, he's going to do what he thinks he needs to do. He did it with his opening speech. He had a speech in his pocket. You addressed it in your book. It's true. And Donald Trump has instincts that certainly have probably fared him well electorally, but not the folks around him. So Donald Trump's not one that's workable or one that is manageable as far as his rhetoric, especially his Twitter feed. So what his staff says and what he does is two different things. Donald Trump so far inside the base has an ignorability factor that people will look past what he says, pick out what they like, and accentuate that. That's what I've seen in this instance so far.
Right. And do you worry that I've likened it to, just because that's in my head really from the book, and thank you for the compliment on it, that it is similar to the way that you saw that the nationalist party, that you call the nationalistic party in South Africa, kind of morphed, right? That it formed around white identity and just sort of took it from there. Do you worry that the image of the Republican Party, there's a poll out, we don't have it this morning, but my predecessor, David Gura, talked about it, that among younger people, the Republican Party's name is mud at this point. They can't get anywhere because they are your party is becoming identified with this kind of racism and nationalism and white nationalism. And isn't that a problem?
I don't fully agree with that. I do agree that the tone is what bothers us that elect people to office. I come from the electoral place of where we put people in office. We recruit the Tim Scotts, the Nikki Haley's. We've tried to diversify our party. And the tone matters to me. As far as the young folks are concerned, I think the economy matters to him, some things that Donald Trump should be talking about that he's not talking about. This is all purely political. This is about re-election for Donald Trump. This is about the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party. I took a big note from what happened at the Democratic congressional meetings that they had for the congressmen and for the governors. And the Democrat governors are the ones that I read that concerns both ways, that Donald Trump gave them huge wins 2 years ago. And now with this presidential primary up and the rhetoric that the 20 are using now, I've never agreed with Terry McAuliffe before, but I agree with him now. The Democratic Party is not talking about what matters to the voters and these young voters. At the same time, the Republicans are not taking advantage of a primary that is going on that's getting a lot of coverage that is, I would contend, not in mainstream electoral politics right now.
Well, let me go to Jason on this, because so there's the politics of it, which, Katon obviously knows the Republican Party politics very well. And then there's just the optics of it. And I just want to get your read on this, because you're out in the world talking to voters, Jason. It feels to me like over the past week, we have not talked at all about whatever it is these young women are for in terms of policy. That whatever policy Republicans thought that they were going to benefit from, saying they could demonize the Green New Deal through them, they could demonize Medicare for All through them. That's gone, right? The Democratic Party is now all united. The German chancellor is united with them, and the leader of Canada, and on and on and on, in just saying their bodies, who they are, is who Donald Trump attacked. Like, that's what they are now. They are now elevated in stature. They now are really beneficial to the party in a way, as far as particularly with younger voters, people who might not have been that excited by this this presidential race. They're now real useful with younger voters. Now young people know who they are if they didn't already. And even on the other side of it, let me play you what Omarosa has said. This is coming from Donald Trump's own friend, okay, that he hired, that he made a star. This is what she said on our air when she was on yesterday on Saturday Night Politics. Take a listen.
At those rallies, these things are choreographed. There are section leaders who helped to start those chants, and so it was intentional, and we know that they did it so that they could start these chants so he could test it.
Okay, it's Omarosa, but she's saying, she's now going after, as a former White House aide, and saying, nope, they did it as a strategy. Like, if his own friend is saying, that former friend,
right.
Give your thoughts, Jason.
Well, so a couple things. One, Omarosa has known that Donald Trump was a racist for years. She told me that during the debates. I just say that now. Like, that's not new. That's not a surprise. But I think, Joy, the dangerous issue here is that we always want to make sure that in a discussion of how racism is being used politically, we understand that the consequences are actually life and death. I vehemently disagree with what Katon is talking about here, that this is all political. Yeah, it may be political for you. It's life and death for these women. It's life and death for people at the border. It's life and death for black and brown and, yes, Heather Heyer, white people in America when you have a president who says that my philosophy for staying in power is to demonize and imply and suggest and encourage violence against people who don't look like me. That's the problem. And everybody knows that he's doing it. And the only difference is that some people say that it's politically convenient and some people argue about tone. I want to live in an America, and I encourage every single person to have this conversation. This is not a strategic issue. It is a national security issue. It is a moral issue. It is an ethical issue. And to the degree that we allow Trump to make this about policy, when the reality is, look, we know he just hates 4 brown women. These are sort of modern-day lynchings. These, Republicans would have been mad about these 4 women regardless of what they said and did. We have to understand that this is not strategic. It's moral, and it has to be looked at that way.
Yeah, I'm going to come back really quick before I go on to the panel, because I'm going to come back to you on this, Katon, because, right, so there is these, as you said, it's not strategy. Per the Washington Post, Donald Trump just sort of burped this out, this tweet. He just did it. And then the team tried to find a way to make it seem like strategery and sort of back strategery into it. And then he goes to this rally where Omarosa is claiming the way they did the rallies was they set it up. I mean, whatever, if you believe Omarosa or not, she's saying it's something they wanted to have happen. It happened. He basks in it. He literally basks in it for 13 whole seconds, which in TV time is like half of a television commercial, okay? And then so it's not strategic for him. It's him. And what it's unleashing, NOLA.com in New Orleans has a piece about a police officer suggesting that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the congresswoman, needs a round. A Gretna police officer posted a comment on his Facebook page this past week calling for Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, calling her a vile idiot who needs a round. And I don't mean the kind she used to serve as a waitress. It's unleashing real violence. It's unleashing violent threads inside the far right that Donald Trump won't reject. So isn't that more than a strategic problem? Isn't that a national security, a domestic security problem, Katon?
Well, I think when you have the rhetoric that we've seen, that it is problematic. I don't agree with everybody on the panel today of where it's going or where it's coming or the danger to national security. And I do think that the tone is not proper. But it does go back to Donald Trump wouldn't be doing this if there wasn't an election in 24 months. I don't think so. I mean, he
did
won.
it when he was just hanging around in New York, and there were 5 guys that like had Okay, well, I don't want to force you. You're literally on your own arguing this. So I'm going to go. I want to get Eric Deggans into this because the media does have a part to play in it. We showed earlier the interaction that Andrew had with Kellyanne Conway, but on a bigger picture, the media, in responding to what they've seen this week, has done a few interesting things. As Tiffany said, they're still fighting about whether to call this racism, because this isn't just like the guy at the end of the bar who's just racist. This is the president of the United States, and there's the idea that white nationalism is a whole different level than racism, right? And they don't even really want to go even close to that. You had what I just showed you, the potential violence, and you've seen instances of violence increase according to him. And then the media decides, who should we talk to about this? Who should we get? Like, who do we? Oh, Richard Spencer. Let's let him comment. Like, he got to comment on TV. Chris Kobach, who couldn't get a job in this administration, where Stephen Miller and Bannon used to work, because he was, in his background profile, they found that white supremacy might be a problem. So he couldn't even get a job here. Here's what he had to say on CNN.
What would you do if the president said, I am a racist? That's why I said it. What would you do? then I would not defend him, because there's no excuse for racism in America.
Would you still support him as president? You have to think about it.
Really tough
you have
question.
to think about whether or not you would support a racist.
So that happened, right? So I mean, how do you assess, Eric, as just a media analyst, of how the media is sort of handling this situation, which could be dangerous? But I don't know. How are we doing?
Well, there's a lot of things to unpack there, for sure. I would say in the Cuomo interview, that's a pretty good example of taking someone and holding them to account and showing how so many Republicans struggle to reconcile their support for the president with his racist actions. Having someone like Richard Spencer on is a different issue, because for a white supremacist like him, being acknowledged by a major media outlet like CNN, that is the victory. He wants to be seen as a valid mainstream commentator on race and social issues. So the minute you put him in front of a camera, he's won. And so you have to ask yourself as a journalist, what am I going to get out of talking to this person that is going to make it worth validating him as a national spokesperson on issues of race and media and politics? And so I think that was a mistake. I would also say that there are not a lot of media outlets out there there's a lot of media outlets out there that are using the word racism and racist to describe what President Trump is doing. And I think the thing that is frightening to a lot of people is that there's a frustration that even though those words are being attached to what he's doing, there's still a significant portion of people who will not reject him. Even though those toxic words have been applied to what he does. There is some discussion in media about when you make that determination, but a Google search will reveal that there are a ton of major media outlets that have called those tweets racist and have called what happened during the rally racist. We're sort of beyond, I think, that. Now, and we're in a uncharted territory where even calling something racist does not cause some people to reject this president or his policies.
Right, and I think partly, Tiffany, because you have partly on the right, there's an idea that as soon as you hear the racism, their just mind turns off because you call everybody racist.
Right.
I mean, I've seen people arguing about that on Twitter. But not every racist is a white nationalist.
Right.
But every white nationalist is a racist, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And there's a very big difference between being racist, which a lot of people may be and have bad feelings, but still be able to, watch NBA basketball and like a black lady. They can put a compromise.
Can I add one other thing?
But hold on a second. The idea that this is supposed to be a white country.
Right.
The underlying message of what Donald Trump said, it's worse than racism. It's saying this is a white country.
Right.
Which is what white nationalists say.
Right.
So Donald Trump has crept over the line, I think, in this statement, which is why so many Republicans, even themselves, freaked out.
Right.
Because saying this is a white country, if you're white and European, you can criticize the country like he did for 20 years, saying the country was garbage.
Yeah.
Until he was president, he said it was garbage. So you can do that if you're German.
Right.
If your grandparents or your mom was Scottish, you're fine.
Totally. Yeah.
Right? I mean, so are we losing the language?
Well, first of all, if we think the MAGA crowd is intellectually sophisticated enough to be able to dissect racism from white nationalists, we are hopeless, because that's not going to happen. And I think, the deal is a lot of people, I've never met a racist who said, oh, yeah, I'm totally a racist. Like, you nailed it. You called me right. Or, yeah, I'm a white supremacist. Most people like to cloak themselves in their own false blanket of security and equality until you start talking to them. I'll tell you quickly, I met two Trump supporters. I was on vacation, and they were trying to convince me that they were not racist. They said, do you know how many black people I've kissed hello since I've been on this island? And proceeded to tell me they had kissed 11 people hello. That is the most racist thing you could have said to me. If the race really didn't matter, then you wouldn't know how many black people you touched or spoke. And I think people have this false expectation that if I'm not walking around in a Klan's hat or if I don't have a Nazi symbol on my arm, I'm not a racist. And that's just not the case. And just really quickly, a lot of the reason is because of the media. The media has legitimized people like Richard Spencer putting him on. The media is scared. And when I'm saying the media, I mean mostly in general, cable news. And it's like if you had more people of color in the executive, in the C-suite making these decisions, they could stop a lot of this from happening and say, yes, guys, this is a racist tweet. There's no debate here. This is the second round of debates we're having for presidential candidates where there are no black women a part of these conversations. The backbone of the Democratic Party. This is a white. The CNN had a segment where they called Kellyanne Conway a badass woman. She was one of the people they featured. We have to start calling these things out. This is accountability all around.
Very quickly.
There's something else. It's not just that there's not enough representation of people of color in newsrooms. It's that the news industry as a whole has been given a form of PTSD by decades of being bashed as the liberal media. And what happens is I think a lot of editors and some reporters think to themselves, well, if I go too hard on this, they're going to call me liberal.
They're going to call me liberal, and they don't want to do it. Really quickly, Eric, very quickly, Eric, and then I'm going to let Jason back in. But, Eric, the other thing that Donald Trump has been able to get away with doing this week is to try to loop Israel in. And even though he has retweeted, he just retweeted a woman who was so anti-Semitic, she lost her Murdoch Industry columns, Katie Porter. He keeps retweeting her. He's retweeted her before. He's retweeted neo-Nazis multiple times during the campaign, as is his son. But they're still trying to do this thing where they pivot and grab Israel in order to defend themselves against the president's racism. And he's really allowed to get away with that.
Well, I think the president is taking advantage of the fact that I think the president is taking advantage of the fact that a lot of Americans don't have a real in-depth knowledge of the issues that involve Israel, that involve the Palestinians, why some Democratic and some progressive politicians are criticizing them, and what that criticism means, and taking advantage of a tendency among evangelicals to feel very warmly towards Israel as well, and taking advantage of people's ignorance. One thing I wanted to say that is fascinating me about this, I think the president and other people engaged in talking about race the way he has, they're trying to move the goalposts in what we define as racism, what we define as racist talk. And that's one reason why it's so important to push back against this. And I also find it interesting that even in this moment, people who are white supremacists do not want to be called racist, which I find amazing.
Right. They're just saying it should be a white country, which is why
don't want to be called racist. And that's one of the enduring, I say that's one of the enduring achievements of the classic civil rights movement, is that we have managed to move these words racism and racist to toxic levels. And it's important to not allow those goalposts to move.
Absolutely. Okay, we are out of time, but Jason, can you hold your comment till the next block, because you're going to be on with us again? All right, so Tiffany and Jason are going to come back later in the show. Jason, hold on to it. Keep it inside of you for the commercial break. Andrew Feinberg, Katon Dawson, Eric Deggans, thank you guys very much. Coming up, and so you're going to hold it for one more segment, because the next segment is your moment of Maxine. That's next.